what do? There are some standard limitations that you can count on, okay? Even if you cannot remember what you memorized on the spot, use these standard limitations. What's the first one? Inability to deal with a root cause of the problem. Okay, inability to deal with the root cause. So sometimes in econs, you just need some memory hacks. Okay, memory hacks like this. Okay, I'll give you one example to see whether you can conjure up the point very quickly. Okay, suppose I'm using expansionary fiscal policy to address unemployment. Can you immediately think of, oh, yeah, fiscal policy helps, but it does not deal with this particular root cause of unemployment? Can you think of any? Okay, if I am raising G, I'm cutting T to boost C and I can reduce unemployment. But which root cause of unemployment cannot be dealt with using fiscal? Structural unemployment. Okay, so you're going to say it doesn't deal with structural unemployment or frictional to a lesser extent as well. Why I say frictional is a lesser extent because it's always there in the background. You're not likely to see, wow, mass unemployment because of frictional unemployment. Okay, it's a temporary form of unemployment that's always happening in the background. Very good. Okay. Now, I give you another example. If I am talking about the use of contractionary monetary policy to deal with inflation. Okay, so I'm trying to reduce inflation. I use pi to represent inflation. Is there any cause of unemployment, any cause of inflation that cannot be dealt with using monetary policy? Now you can think of monetary as interest rate policy, exchange rate policy, up to you. But straight away, can you latch on to a form of unemployment that, yeah, I cannot use monetary policy to address this? Shu, you're saying cost push? Specifically, which form of cost push inflation cannot be dealt with? Imported possible, but what if this monetary policy is exchange rate policy? I appreciate my exchange rate. Yes, so you can say wage push. Hi, wage push inflation cannot be dealt with using my contractionary fiscal policy, monetary policy. Okay, now, so this is giving you a very quick memory hack. Okay, if you are talking about policy limitations in the exam hall, you forget everything. Never mind. One standard limitation is when you think of this point. Okay, do you know this extends even way back to market failure? What if I am using taxation to address the case of cigarettes? Okay, but what are you going to say here? If I tax cigarettes to deal with market failure, which root cause of market failure is not dealt with using taxation? Oh, wonderful. Imperfect info requires another policy in the form of campaigns, right? So that can be your R2 and your corresponding E2 when you talk about limitations and interim evaluation. Do you follow? Okay, so don't worry that, hey, I didn't have time to memorize before the test, okay? Or in the exam hall, so stressful, I don't have enough time to write. Use this as your memory hack, okay? Good. So I said, hi, I said fiscal policy, I said monetary policy. Okay, this is to deal with various macro problems. Okay. So I have inflation, I have unemployment. Of course, when I bring in economic growth, okay, or if I bring in BOT, you can still highlight some of these points. Okay. What is the second standard limitation? Okay. Second standard limitation is when you consider or a trade-off. A possible trade-off between your goals, okay? Possible trade-off. That is also a policy drawback, okay? Example, I still talk about expansionary fiscal policy and I still want to address unemployment. What is my possible trade-off here? When I use expansionary fiscal policy, there's a risk of demand pull inflation. Very good. Some more. There's another trade-off, you know. Which other goal? Crowding out is possible if you have to borrow, all right? But crowding out is not really a trade-off per se, in the sense another goal worsens. But BOT, very good. Can you explain why BOT worsens? Okay, when you increase national income because of expansionary fiscal policy, what are households going to do with the money? They are going to buy more imports. And this worsens balance of trade. Do you follow? So this is another limitation you can invoke on the spot. Okay, I'm trying to relieve the amount of things you have to memorize here, right? Okay, what about if I appreciate my exchange rate, right? If I appreciate my exchange rate to reduce inflation, what is the downside? So I have inflation, I appreciate my exchange rate. What's going to happen? Trade-off with exports economic growth, right? You will have lower X minus M, which leads to lower growth and higher unemployment. You flip it around, if I depreciate the exchange rate to boost growth, okay, the downside is you are going to experience imported inflation. Am I right? Okay. Now, if you just join us, okay, this is so much I've written, not that much, okay, in the past 7 minutes or so, because in recognition that many of you have a test coming up, okay, mid-years coming up, I wanted to give you a small little tip that helps you churn out policy limitations. When do you write about policy limitations? Usually your higher order questions, right? In your case study is 8 marks, 10 marks, in your essay is part B. And that's usually in your E2. When you talk about limitations, then your interim evaluation. So if you're worried that you cannot think of limitations on the spot, what did I call this? I called this standard limitations. Okay? Being standard limitations, you can use them whenever you run out of points, you run out of bandwidth, okay? You run out of memory space, try to use them. The first one requires you to think back, try to break the problem into its root causes, break it down into its root causes and see this particular policy, which root cause does it address, which root cause does it not address? Because for sure, it cannot address all your root causes. That's not possible. Okay? Whereas the other one requires you to think back to your government's objectives, to government goals. Okay? Of course, government goals within macro, you can really find trade-offs because I taught you 4 standard trade-offs. And if you are doing something related to microecons, you can do that as well. Maybe I'll give you a micro example. If if I were to introduce carbon taxation to address negative externalities in the form of pollution, which micro objective could be frustrated? If I introduce carbon taxes, it would mean power bills, electricity bills become more expensive. Inequity, yes. Okay, because electricity is a necessity. Okay, so what comes after the cross are the standard points, limitations.